All right, so we have discussed about the logical access exposures. So we'll discuss now about rest of the topics. So next topic is to understand security layers within the organization. So when you look at organization, the first layer of infrastructure which is there is the network, right? So then you have to look at on top of that you will have operating systems, and then database and other application layers. So those are the normal layers that you would find in an organization which you have to secure. So apart from that, these days you of course you'll have like this virtualization and other related things. Okay, so uh, then you have to understand you have other parts of logical access which you have to understand. So when you look at organization, there are a lot of ways of entering into an organization, right? Entering into the organization. So those are the logical access pathways. So somebody can connect to the network through the VPN or like to remote access, right? Or else you can directly log into a switch or a router, right? Through the operator console. So that's basically another way of logging in, and also online workstations terminals. So these days you can have cloud access, and even like through terminals like phones and all that you can access. So all these possibilities are there. So what you have to do basically to find a mechanism to close down all these network connections. So one thing is the best way to do is would be to close down everything, but the issue is that you are not supposed to close down everything, because you have to allow some of the connections to come in. So easiest way would be to have a firewall as the entry point of the network, and then you can close and open the necessary ports, and then you can have a monitoring scheme throughout, right? So that's basically the logical access pathways, right? So the purpose of the is to prevent unauthorized access getting into the organization. All right. um, right, so logical access software, control software. So a general operating system and application level, there are so many different types of software available, right? So you have to do all these things when you use software: create user profiles, assign user identification, apply credentials, log events. So if you think about a router that is allowing communication to the organization, so that you have to do basically all these settings, right? uh, okay, so then you are supposed to do the logical access control in multiple layers, and these are the things that you can do it the database layer. So you can do it at the network layer, operating system layer, and also database and application layer. So there are also you can create database profiles, user logins, authorization. So for authorizations you can use things like access control matrices, right? So those things can be used. So basically access control matrix would have a user 1, user 2, and then the objects that you can access: object 1, object 2, object 3. So there can be a case where user 1 can access 2 objects, user 2 can access so this is basically, yeah, so this is user 1 and user 2 and then user 3, right? So user 2 can access this and this, user 3 can access all 3. So likewise you can have access control matrix, right? So this is called access control matrix. So similarly you can define authorization levels, right? Then verify users authorization at the field level. So this is like field level, you can do that. And of course you can have logging, accounting. So very famous example is like you can have a log server storing all the data within the organization. So there's this famous open source server, Kiwi syslog server. So something like this can be used. But these days, guys, remember there are plenty of other advanced tools like ELK stack. Uh, so these things are very popular, which connected with SOCs, security operation centers, and so many other utilities. Right, you will be able to handle these things, right? So that's actually mouthful of technologies that you can use to do these things, right? So now we'll discuss a question. Which of the following best, right, provides access control to payroll data being processed on a local server? So you have a server where you have payroll information, right, employee payroll information. So what is the best access control mechanism? Logging access to personal information. That's basically accounting. So not access control as per se. Using separate password for sensitive transactions. Yeah, that's also something that you guys can do. And using software that restricts access rules to authorized staff. Yeah, using software that restrict access to access rules to authorized staff. Yeah, so that's an advanced setting that you can try out. Restricting system access to business hours. All right. So what would be the best access control? So here, probably looking from outside. Okay, so this would be something useful. System access only the business hours or rest of the hours you will not be allowing this access. That's a good one. So probably this is probably number one priority at the moment. Using software that restricts access rules to authorized staff. Yeah, so authorized staff, of course, you can have access rules. But even for other people, you would have access to. So we'll have two. This one probably we can remove using separate password for sensitive transactions. That's of course access control, but bit beyond that. So I would go for this, right? All right. Right. So now we are talking about something different this time. So it's also related to access control, but specifically we are talking about authentication. So to basically ask the question, who am I? Right? Who am I? So, so basically, you tend to identify the person, right? So these are the common vulnerabilities that you find when you're supposed to do that. So basically, what you do, like you can use a password, passphrase, biometrics. So those are the options that you normally have when you work with identification and authentication, right? So these days we use two-factor authentication. So two factors or multi-factor authentication. These are commonplace these days, two-factor. So, but still, the old methods are a bit vulnerable. Lack of confidential integrity for the stored authentication information. So, one thing to remember, when you do authentication, these passwords can be stored in a database, like a shadow or like a file. So, if you are not safeguarding these things, somebody can access this. This means like they can get your data and enumerate yourself. And lack of encryption for authentication protection. So again, no encryption provided. So you have to use all these proper techniques to get into security. All right. All right. So we can use these things. So these are the basic stuff. So you can use free passwords and token devices. So here the multi-factor authentication, there are different dimensions that you guys can look into. Basically what you have, what you are, or what you know, right? Basically the password and phrases and what you are, right? So if you write down these things, what you know, right? So passwords, what you know, and also so this is K, no W. This is what you are. So basically, it's about biometrics. It can be your eye, or it can be eye scan, or it can be your other biometrics, right? Iris scan or retina scan, or it can be what you have. So that is something that you carry, a kind of a token device, what you have, right? So those are the other related things, right? So if you can use at least two of them together, so that do something. So as an example, if you're talking about two-factor authentication in Google, right? So in Google, you have basically the password, and also they use your phone to verify who you are. So that's basically a two-factor authentication. So we can have three-factor authentication as well, which can make it a bit complicated, but still it's available and it's useful, right? All right. And the best practices for passwords. So there's plenty, and then password should be a minimum of 8 characters. But please remember, uh, these days this should be uh, should be a lot more than that, right? Lot more than that. Even it can go up to 16 characters or like say 12 characters, right? So password should be a combination of alphanumeric, upper, lowercase, and special characters. And login IDs not used should be deactivated. If there's uh, so yeah, so if you are not using any login IDs, it should be deactivated. So uh, after some time it's not being used, you can deactivate it. And system should automatically disconnect with no activity. So those are some of the things, right? And IS auditor has just completed a review of an uh, so you can read through review of an organization that has mainframe and client server environment where all production data resides. Which of the following weakness would be considered the most serious? Alright, so you have to find out a weakness when case where there's a mainframe and a client server environment. The security officer also serves as the database administrator, which is yeah, kind of a problem, right? So uh, yeah, so read the other things. Password controls are not administered over the uh, um, or the client server environment. There's no business continuity plan for the mainframe, non-critical application. Non-critical, so you can just omit that one. So this is important at the moment. One. Uh, and then password controls are not administered over the client server environment. So again, that's a weakness, but I think first one is bigger problem. So this is like continue in this way, like you have a kind of a priority listed. Most local area networks LANs do not back up your server fixed regularly, so that's not really important. So I think we have to go for this, right? All right, so then we talked about these 3 factors, so you can use biometrics as another solution. Right, so now we're jumping into SSO, single sign-on. Uh, so single sign-on is basically a setup where when you have multiple systems to log into, right? So you can have your ERP system, one of your payroll systems, and then there's another procurement system. So there's plenty of systems for you guys to connect to. And then rather than connecting into all different systems using multiple different authentication schemes, passwords, it's more of recommended to use one option where it can really help you out in terms of securing your environment. So you have a one particular place to log in called SSO, right? And through that you guys can connect to the network. One of the problems of SSO is like there is this central point of failure in SSOs. So that's a very common problem when it comes to SSOs. And also to set up SSOs, it might take a bit of a time. It's a bit complicated than setting up a normal logins at these different places. All right, so single sign-on interfaces with client server distributed systems, mainframe systems. So when systems become large, complicated, so SSOs would really fit in. So the advantages would be uh, for the SSOs. So multiple passwords are no longer required, like I said. So you can use a one strong password, which is really recommended, and it improves administrators' ability to manage user accounts and authorizations to all associate systems. It reduces administrative overhead. Of course, you don't have to remember several of these passwords and over multiple platforms, right? So you have a one specific one which you guys can log in. So which is highly recommended when you have a distributed this, these complicated systems, right? and then it reduces the time taken by users to log into multiple applications. So think about a user where it's seriously trying to log into multiple systems. It might take a long time for them to do that. Whereas when you have SSO from one login, you'll be able to access every other system. So this is something that you see in Office 365. So once you log in from office.com, you can access applications like Streams. You can use your mail client, and you can access Teams account and OneNote. So all these things are accessed from the same location. So this is also possible with Google single sign-on and other concepts. Right. So disadvantage of such systems would be support for all major operating system is difficult. So you have to basically create environments to do that. It might not be that easy. So setting up things would be quite difficult, right? Quite difficult. So some sort of technical intervention should be there. And cost associated SSO can be significant also. And centralized nature can give out some sort of risk or single point of failure. Rather, the single point of failure is the key issue here. Uh, so one has to be very careful of knowing exactly how to be implement this, what are the guidelines, what are the policies, procedures to follow. So if something is missing, so that can lead into a bit of a problem, right? So try out this one. So take 1 or 2 minutes and go through it and we discuss them. All right, so it says an organization is proposing to install a single sign-on system, uh, giving single sign-on system facility given for all systems. Organizers should be aware of maximum unauthorized access would be possible if password is disclosed. Of course, that's somewhat of a big problem. Use access rights would be restricted by the additional security parameter. Okay, so this A is the answer. Right, so now we are jumping into authorization levels. So in a normal asset, right? So if you use a normal asset, so authorization levels are quite important. So you can see multiple different types of authorization level: read, inquiry, copy, write, create. So those are the things that is available. So you can use multiple of them and basically handle all these things in a given asset, right? Uh, all right. All right. So next, so for authorization, to handle authorization, we can use access control list. So access control is a network technique that we normally use to handle these sort of situations. So in a given access control list, you can say basically provide options to protect our resources with given facilities, right? And then when you do authorization, so you can use it in two different ways. One is for centralized environments and then for decentralized environments, right? So one of the concerns of authorization would be in a decentralized setting, security admission is on-site at the distributed location, and security issues resolved timely manner, and security controls are monitored frequently, right? And also there are risks involved when talking about authorization. So there can be different standards, so there can be mismatches of standards which can result in concerns. And also as auditor, we have to worry about whether these authorization policies have been properly updated. So if not, then there can be concerns. And this is a special category of authorization, which is the remote access authorization, which is something very, very useful for auditors' perspective. So because these days, even see for online work and work from home situations, so there are a lot of people accessing things from remote. So then there should be different types of policies, like VPN is there. So there should be a VPN policy. Then you have using a BYOD or bringing on. It's like you are using your own device. So then basically you have to protect the organization data by using your own device. And then again you have this issue of connecting to the connecting to set particular devices, so there should be a remote access policy. So there are a long list of different needs of for remote access security. So basically how you do this by handling this through basically you are handling this through different types of policies and procedures and of course guidelines. Right, so these are the security risk involved. Denial of service is possible. Somebody can be attacking one of the particular servers, whereas they can do a DDoS attack. So we discussed about these things. So whereas a legitimate user would not be able to access it. And also malicious third parties, they just placed Trojan horses and things like that. So then, okay, you will get some viruses, malware informed. And misconfigured communication software, which result in, again, a failure in a device. Yeah, misconfigured devices in the corporate computing infrastructure. So if something like that happens, so there a lot of data can get open up to um, many different people, so which can be a critical problem. Physical security issues over remote users computers, that's another one. And then remote access security controls include policies and plans. So these are the things you have to start with, guys. Right. So the organization wide you have to have policies, and then of course you have proper authorizations who can come in, who can basically access your resources. Identification and authentication mechanisms, encryption tools, so VPN, and also use proper encryption tools, not the weakest ones. So there are a lot to select. So from them you can select few. And system and network management, so you can do monitoring, you can use those tools to monitor things and to configure proper security. All right, moving on. So then I talked about these things, so there should be sort of proper mechanisms to use these mobile devices. So thing is, mobile devices can get lost, so there are sort of concerns surrounding this topic. All right, and then okay, so this we talked about, right? Okay, so then comes when it comes to authorization, you have to discuss and think about intrusion detection systems and intrusion prevention systems. So what you do basically in intrusion detection system, you have a box where when the communication channel or the network communication goes through this channel, if there's any intrusions, they will try to detect it, right? They will try to detect it or they will try to prevent it. So they can use both options, either detect or prevent, right? So two options are there. Detection is just a mere identification of knowing the malware or intrusion behaviors are present. So they can do it multiple different ways. They can look at the signatures of the traffic. So they can look at the signature of the traffic, and then they can give out a kind of a mm, decision, okay, there is this intrusion or malware behavior. Or they can do some anomaly based studies, statistical anomaly based studies. Anomaly, because anomalies can give you idea, okay, what is not normal. So what is not normal can be obviously a intrusion, but you have to understand there are some quadrants that you have to worry about. So there are things like say there can be true positives, and then there's false positives, and then true negatives, or false positives, right? And true negatives and false negatives. So true positive is as actually, so you identify as a malware and it's truly a malware. False and true negative is you identify it's not a malware, it's not a malware, it's the proper condition. And false positive is again a bad, this is a bad situation. You identify it's a malware but it's not a malware, right? So but this is a case where you don't identify it's a malware but it's a malware. So likewise, there are situations which you have to really concern about. So the thing is, some of the accuracy levels can be better when it comes to anomaly based detections, and now they use machine learning, deep learning techniques, which can give you better results, right? And also the other thing is prevention systems having more options where they even can not only detect, they can prevent a malware affecting a system, which can be better in terms. But one of the catch would be normally like IDSS, you try to implement normally in we call as the offline mode. This is the data traffic. So what you do is somewhere here we can put a device and we can get a offloaded copy of the communication channel, and this is where with the detection system where it doesn't really affects the real-time traffic because it's an offloaded communication channel, right? But IPSs have to be always put in online. So this is the detection system, whereas prevention system should be placed somewhere here, right? Yeah, so prevention systems are online where they basically have to sometimes block the traffic, and you can work on the traffic. So it can add a delay to the network. So this is something common when it comes to IPSs. All right, so I think okay, we'll stop from that part. So then the rest will come in the next session.